Helen,
yeah,
do you want to introduce your project?
Yeah. My part of the project was looking at how we could introduce social media tools into the classroom, because in communications, in journalism, in PR, in other communications areas, they're some of the most avid users professionally of social media tools. So we decided to look at how we can introduce the teaching of social media through the tools rather than about the tools. What we've done in the past is case studies, you know, say, look, this is an example of where, say, journalists crowdsourced or whatever. And it doesn't, in that way, the students don't get a feel for what the tools are actually like in an authentic situation. So, so we looked, Danny, Richard and myself, along with Tom, looked at ways we might be able to introduce into the classroom ways that students could learn through say, their assessments or through their classroom experience. So I brought Twitter into the classroom with mixed success. And another thing I decided to do was look at the traditional essay. Now, we've been doing essays the same way for hundreds of years, nothing wrong with that. But they basically use one mode, the mode of writing and the mode of reading. And nowadays, people don't learn that way, they don't communicate that way. So they communicate in a multimedia world in a multimedia way. So over the summer, I spent the summer with a student looking at the various tools that were out there that we might be able to use in a classroom situation. And one of those that came up was Storify.com, which is where you can still do the traditional essay writing and use traditional sources, but you can use that function to search the net for social, for things that are going on in blogs, on Twitter, in Facebook, and what have you. You can search all of those tools for discussions that are going on around your topic. So students could actually, one thing that was wonderful about this is that they were completely up to date. So books are often out of date, journal articles are out of date by the time they're published, certainly in this area. So the discussions that are going on right now on blogs, on various other platforms, even say Columbia Journalism Review and what have you, are right up to date. Also, one thing that Nikki and I found when we were marking this was that actually you could also check often, unless you're across everything that's been written about a topic, you have to take it on trust that the student is actually using this source correctly. In this particular program, you can go back to the source because they link to it. So you can actually go back and if you think, oh gosh, I don't know a lot about that, you can go and read and you know as much as the student by the time you've finished. So it's actually, it might take a bit longer to mark, but it's a learning environment for the tutor as well. You found that, didn't you?
Yeah. You know, I wasn't as across the literature as other people, because I was teaching for Helen, but it was fantastic because all the links, you can see that the student has used it in a good way or not in a good way. Is it relevant to the essay? And you can see immediately whether it's relevant or not, more than you can in a book reference or a
and I think it also excites the students a bit more because it's using material that they're much more familiar with. It's using video, it's using Twitter and what have you. It brings it into the essay.
So it's much more fun to mark.
Much more fun to mark.
There was video in it that were links to all sorts of cartoons, all sorts of stuff.
I ended up forwarding stuff going, ooh, this is quite fun. So, you know, the students, I felt, actually, they really made it fun for us to mark. So we're going to see a couple of examples. I'll sit down and hand over to the real expert. Caroline, are you first? Are you going to introduce yourself a little bit and your approach to it?
Yeah, I guess so. Just there's no screen on the front, so we're having to use the little guy, so it's just going to be a bit interesting. Great. So I actually really enjoyed this assignment. I thought it was totally new and unexpected, really. In terms of an essay, all of my essays had always been very academic and very much from books and journals and all these sorts of things. So being able to use this type of format was actually really fun, and it allowed me to be more chatty, I guess. I took on a really kind of blog kind of format. I hadn't done a lot of blogs before. And so mine was all very kind of chatty, slow feel in how it's written. So you'll see that when I go through. I'm not going to bore you with the entire essay, but I think if you hadn't seen Storify so much, I can show you at least how some of it works. That might actually be better for you. So, bear with me for a second.
Just 2 fingers to scroll.
Oh yeah, that's right. Cool. So the topic was how has social media altered the relationship between journalists and public relations practitioners? That was the basis of it. And I started off with a bit of a shock factor. We learned a little bit about shock factor. So I don't know whether I should be showing you this, but anyway, it's kind of funny. I mean, in a very bad way. So in this example, basically a PR practitioner who was an employee of the company tweets something quite bad about a journalist, but it happens that the journalist works with this particular company. Okay. So he tweets, "Great gent reminds me of a girlfriend I once had. By girlfriend I mean that time I accidentally made love to an ugly, abhorrent racehorse." Now, in the end, it goes on and she says, "I hope you appreciate that you work for this company, and you'll bear the brunt of your idiocy at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning when you are unemployed. Good luck." That's the basis of that. Here's my little bit of shock factor. But as you can see with that, so there's a tweet, and then obviously within it's the link. So within this, you get to go right through back to the source. And then we have video.
Hey, I was just following up on that email I sent you yesterday.
So what? You know how many emails I get a day? You PR people are always bugging me. Can't you see I'm busy copying this press release and pretending I wrote it? Can you help a sister get a job?
Yeah. So again, yeah, I decided to use a bit of humour within my Storify.
That was nice too.
Then of course you go on to a bit more of the more serious side of defining what it is, that type of thing, and you can bring in plain old website articles, journalism. So so you can say, well, this is what it is through different websites. So there's a URL function within Storify which allows you to bring in these types of things. Cute pictures.
Which have nothing intellectual.
Nothing intellectual, but it's nice to be able to, literally I went to Google Images and looked for a person scratching their head and came up with that one, and it was too cute not to put in there. There's more videos in terms of educational things, and that is actually this particular video is actually quite cool. I'm not going to, it's quite long, but it's basically a guy just drawing the relationship between how we work with communications these days, that type of thing, and how it's changed us. But it's actually quite cool. I'll just show you what I mean quickly.
An analysis of traditional media channels which have been used for mass
But in terms of learning,
is a good way to begin to understand how communication
it makes it really simple, and because it's in video format, it does,
I'm just
I
going
don't know,
to
more
give an
accessible
example
for the
of
kids these
popular
days.
channels which are out there. So you have television, you have radio, and the newspaper. And these are great at reaching out to a mass audience. However,
There you go. Do tell me and make me...
typically one-way channels. What I mean is that you could reach...
the other thing was that before we started this, Helen did say to us, you might find it difficult to connect, to make it flow, to have it flowing, because you've got so many examples like that. I didn't find it too difficult, but then I tried not to explain the example before I put it in there. I sort of like had the text and then popped the example in there and then made the person, do the connection, make the connection between the text and the example.
Caroline was probably the student that used the most of this format. Some of the other students used a lot more text and a lot less. But yeah, I thought you used it brilliantly. It worked really well. The way you did it.
Some of us are very good at those.
Again, more videos. So I mean, while you can be, you know, chatty and fun and those things, you can also obviously have pieces that are.
And there's obviously a reference in there, you know,
Lots of traditional references, yeah.
Yeah.
We did demand that. They had to do a traditional essay. This was on top of what was in a traditional essay.
Good and sorry.
So all of us have a lot.
Yeah. The Arab Spring, like this example is just something that's actually a bit more serious, more tweeting. Articles.
I imagine that I write blogs like the guy who wrote that 100 years ago. They're unreadable and overwordy.
Sorry.
Let's go down. I want to talk. Oh, sorry. I want to look at what you said about Wesley McCain.
Okay. So this is when this part of the essay became more theoretical. So and it kind of needed a little lead-in because it'd been so chatty and everything prior to that it was like, well, now we've got to get a little bit serious and what are these guys to say? And then went into that. Thank you, Evan. And you can these pictures of the diagrams and stuff, they're all online as well. So you can pop them in there. I don't know exactly what to tell you.
Yeah, I think it was a good mixture of traditional, you know, the traditional sourcing, the good arguments, but also you didn't have to find the diagram and put it in, or you could put it in if you wanted to. You know, it was a really good mix of blogs and video and funny bits and not funny bits and really serious.
Did it take you longer than a traditional essay?
It did, in terms of, you know, finding your examples, then yes, I mean, it took quite a bit of time to find them. But that was kind of fun. So it wasn't like a real chore to do. And I was actually a bit of a geek and was like, yeah, this is actually really fun. I really enjoyed doing it. So it wasn't hard in that regard.
One or two of the students actually created the Storifys on their iPads.
Yeah.
Did you use an iPad or?
No, I didn't.
Yeah. So that was one of the benefits of Storify, is there's actually a really good iPad app as well. So if students have an iPad, they can create the whole thing on an iPad and didn't even have to touch a computer. So it gave much more access to the technology as well.
What we did say was, though, that if they couldn't get it to work, they didn't have to use it, and probably 3 of them handed in an ordinary essay format. And I think that made it less stressful for students who felt that, you know...
Well, one of them didn't have access, somewhere where he didn't have access, he couldn't get
Well,
online.
he put links on, so he must have. But, you know, it was just, I think there were some of the students who were a bit stressed by the whole Storify thing, and if you were, you didn't do it that way.
Well, that's interesting because, you know, from a teaching perspective, did you use the same marking criteria?
Yes.
We didn't, so I didn't mark according to whether you'd use Storify well. So I was quite careful that I was marking according to the content, and it was great marking it this way, but the criteria for marking the essay were...
Yeah, that was only just modified slightly, the rubric, to include the medium.
She has done Storify really well, she's put lots of lovely, funny links in, there was nothing of that. It was whether the argument worked well in the same way that you would mark
Whether they
essay.
sourced it properly.
I think what really worked as a student was it freed you up to be a little creative and think about the topic in a way that you wouldn't when you look into traditional essay mode.
I understand that, but I'm looking at it from the other way around because one of the biggest challenges when you set different types of assessment is to make it equitable by having similar criteria.
Yeah.
And that's my reason, not so much, you know, I can imagine.
We had a problem with, one of the issues we had was actually ethically we couldn't really say to everybody you have to do it when we're not teaching, when we're not actually teaching how you do it. So we had to think through how we would make it equitable with the marking if people didn't do it. And that was something that we were quite careful about. We did ask that they still use 3 social media. They had to use 3 sources and 3 social media platforms. They could do that without embedding. They could just put the link and we could cut and paste it into there. It wasn't quick, and it didn't, so they still had to use the sourcing. They just didn't have to use the platform.
Yes,
We
they all
probably
have,
did
they all
it.
have links in there.
Yeah.
If you put it in a traditional essay format, you were expected to embed links into that.
We probably better move on
so-
to next example, because we've still got a couple more things to cover.
Caroline, can you send me a link to that?
Yep.
Would you like to do it again in other courses?
To use Storify now? Yeah, I mean, sure. Yes, I mean, I really honestly enjoyed doing it. And the platform itself isn't hard to learn. It's actually quite simple to learn if you are, 101 computer like me. I did have 1 or 2 little saving disasters, but
I think a few people did have those.
yeah.
Yeah, we did, yeah.
And the other thing is, we found that if you don't publish, we couldn't pick it up.
Yeah.
They had to give us the password and
Their own
everything.
password for it in order to pick it up if they didn't want to publish it.
Though, that it was easier to manage your sources through using Storify, because you could keep them all on the page while you were working with them. And I like to research while I write, so it enabled me to do that.
Do you have a reference page on this?
Yes, at the bottom. Sorry, I'm logging out. But yeah, there's just a normal bibliography like anyone else's. But yeah, we kind of had a bit of discussion around that. I mean, I put mine in there in terms of all of the websites and stuff that I'd used, but I think some may have just left it in because you can go to the sources.
Yeah.
It's
Some
already
people just
in
put the
there.
academic references at the bottom and obviously use the sources.
Right, can I just put my name in?
Yeah. Just log in as yourself.
The only thing I'd say is really different between Storify and traditional essays is the tone that the students seem to take. They seem to get much more relaxed, and their language is less academic, and that seems to be almost exclusively. And I think
there were some.
there were some almost, but there were some that retained it. But on the whole, it just seems that the whole format gets them more.
It'll come
more
up with your
chatty.
Storify.
I don't think that's a problem too much, but some people might.
I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
So you just click on your name, it should take you to your page.
Okay.
Your Storify.
Oh, here we
There
go.
you go.
I think we were allowed to be chatty.
Yeah, I said it didn't matter. Yeah.
But you could, you
It was a requirement.
could you have written it in a more formal style and still made Storify work?
I don't think it would have been fun, but
Yeah.
I guess so.
I didn't really adapt the way that I wrote terribly on Storify compared to how I'd write on a blog or an essay, because I do write rather old school, so I think my essay reflected that a little bit, and in comparison to a lot of the essays around, it was quite dystopian and negative about the potential for social media to actually have a positive impact on the relationship between PR and journalism, but I thought it'd be nice to be different. And so I started with some classic manufacturing consent, because that's the go-to for any dystopian writing on social media. And what I wanted to do was just set a conversational tone for the essay before launching into a very descriptive text-based analysis of why the relationship between journalists and PR practitioners is forever in the favor of PR now. And I looked at, again, what was great about Storify was that you were able to move a lot of the text that you wanted into links and other things, and for someone that has trouble getting down to a word limit, that was very useful. And I'm sure a lot of the classmates did complain somewhat about how massive my Storify thing was in comparison to theirs, but I liked embedding my sources right into there, and I found that it enabled me to get a mix between, current examples and theorists that I think haven't really lost their validity even in a new social media paradigm. And what I quite liked was getting the practitioner perspective that you're able to do through utilizing Twitter and things like that. So you're able to back up a theory by someone that works in the discipline and getting their commentary on it. And basically I unpack different theories about how you would conceive the relationship between the two, whether it was through a political economy approach or something more positive that looks at the ability to democratize communication. And when I couldn't find a quote, I went on Twitter myself and made one up, which is being a little bit creative, but there you go, it's Storify for you. And I do like the ability to, you know, still bring out the theories that I think hold a lot of validity here. So I put in a lot of Chomsky and quite negative things like that. But I tried to cover all the theorists that you'd expect, like encoding, decoding with Hall, social economy of the media, looked at like McLuhan and technological determination. And then I kind of set the scene on what the traditional relationship was like, and then tried to break up what was probably a very mundane essay with some fun videos. And I thought that the more entertaining extra sources I put in there, the more likely it was that the Margas would keep on reading and not just stop. So I definitely tried to use it to my advantage, but I did find myself writing an essay and then figuring out how to stick it into the format rather than starting it the other way around, which probably added another 4 to 5, 6 hours to the essay, which maybe wasn't necessarily intelligent, but there you go. And I guess what I quite liked was working in social media. I was able to utilize a lot of practical things that I had seen through, you know, people, opinion leaders and bloggers that I found interesting, and was able to use them as examples rather than having to write them out. So it kind of makes it more interactive and puts less emphasis on your hand cramping after like 10 hours of writing. And I think the basis for my article was just trying to set the scene that while the internet theoretically is a democratizing thing through how it's set up, that hasn't really altered the power structures inherent in media, and if anything, the way that search engines are structured, with the link, you know, the richest content increasing the most links being the most viewed, it's actually condensed mass opinion rather than spreading it out. So you're only going to listen to Fox and CNN again rather than your mum's blog, which might get 5 views over its lifetime. But what I really enjoyed was you can embed an entire article right in your essay, and when you wanted to pick bits from it, you can refer back to it while you're writing, which I found was quite interesting and useful. And I think what helps here is that you're able to build a narrative while you're writing. So I wanted to sort of chart changing relationships between journalists and PR practitioners and how certain outside external factors have affected it, like, you know, changes in the newsroom and immediacy and the need to break stories rather than investigate them. And I found that I quite enjoyed using stories like this to back up what I was saying, because professionals can say it much better than me. And we get their ads as well, which is delightful.
There's really 2 ways that we get our information. One way is the traditional image of journalism, and that is this wonderful woman right here with the glasses turns to this woman next to her and says, "Hey, you look like a journalist. You've got the little, you got pen and stuff like that. We've got a problem in my neighborhood. There's a toxic waste dump or something because the kids are getting sick, and I called the mayor, I called the state government, I called everybody, nothing is happening. You need to go write about it, journalists. And this is your job. This is what you do for a living. You're not doing 3 other jobs during the day, putting your kids to sleep, and then trying to blog at night. This is your job. You are a journalist. Go out and write about this problem." And so journalists, you go out, you write about it. You ask questions, you look back at records, you use all the skills and all the training you have, and you find out there was a toxic waste dump there. You go to the mayor, you speak truth to power, and something happens, right? That's the old way. That's one way that we think of information coming to people. The other way is power speaks its truth to us. They hold a press conference, they put a video news release out, they in some way manage a story to make us talk about it. Power decides what the debate is, what we should be thinking about it, what the
This
parameters of
theory
the debate are.
basically framed my
Basically frame our
entire
discourse.
analysis, so
Few
I
studies.
really
How many
enjoyed being
stories
able
came
to
from
add the
traditional
video into
journalism
it
model,
rather than
how many
having to
from
write it out
power
like over a
speaking
page. So this is
And
the
it's
big thing,
86%
Storify, that I
of
think
the stories
aids
from power
students
speaking.
writing.
Only 14% fit that traditional journalism model. You think, well, that's really rough for Baltimore.
Yeah.
We studied cities across the
This
United
is
States.
really good.
Across the United States, in 1960, we had one journalist for every one
Okay, well,
relations
we
person.
probably better move on.
Oh yes,
In
right.
1980, we had
And basically, what was interesting about this guy's analysis was charting how in journalism and PR it's now power speaking to journalists rather than them acting as gatekeepers. And I found the story and the facts that he used to back it up really compelling in my article, which was nice. And if I'm going to skip really quickly, I thought it'd be mean to not provide the counterpoint, and what is great is that there's just so much information out there on the internet that you can access quickly, even if you are going to write a really wordy and negative article. You can actually easily find counterpoints, and I found that, you know, being able to link straight to PR companies and companies' blogs and then back up what you're saying really helped. Like the GM Fastlane blog is particularly relevant for that, and instead of having to write out theories, you're able to get the authors talking about them themselves, and I find that's a lot more compelling because they can do it better than I can.
A lot more authentic in some ways, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're not.
Yeah, and I just think, you know, hearing like a journalist talk earnestly about the death of investigative journalism rather than me write it over, you know, a 10-minute essay is a lot more powerful for the reader.
Did you learn as much so that you could just maybe watch a couple of seconds of that and think, oh, that's relevant?
Well, I watched the whole thing because it actually got me more interested in the topic while I was writing. I found that I've retained a lot more from writing this than I do with the usual essay, because it's not just a text dump. It's not just me trying to cram in 15 theorists into one essay. I was actually able to take a second and listen to what these people had to say and then contextualize it in what I was thinking.
But ideally, that's what a text-based essay should be doing.
Yeah, I know, but the reality with some of us out there who are not the world's most organized people is we just don't have the time for it. So I really enjoyed mixing this up a little bit, and, you know, it did keep it fresh for you writing it as well as, I guess, reading it. And what's great is you can include all your sources, and they're easy to find straight there off the page, so they can tell if you're trying to cheat it. Other than that, yeah, I highly recommend letting your students try it out, because I think they'll get a lot more out of what they're writing. You know, their research will be more than just reading a book. For people that learn through hearing a conversation rather than reading a chapter, they'll be a lot more engaged by the ability to, you know, actually learn that way. And so, being one of those people, I found Storify particularly cool to that. And that's why, you know, even now I like reading the article, because it's got some information there that I was surprised when I stumbled across, and I was really happy to, you know, sort of create the narrative as I went along rather than have to plan it in my head in advance. But yeah, that's more or less me.
Awesome. Well, we do need to move on, so thank you, and we'll probably need to save the questions for a bit later, because I'm just going to put Andrew up now, because Andrew has to rush off to a meeting, and then we'll come back to Avril.
Everyone's seen my one.